The world went black as I collapsed by the stairs, my diabetic episode hitting without warning. When I came to, I was alone on the cold hardwood floor. Danny had been there when I fell. I heard his voice, felt him check my breathing. But instead of calling 911 or staying to help, he'd stepped around my unconscious body, grabbed something from the kitchen, and left for his so-called job interview. That moment, lying there abandoned, I realized my 29-year-old son cared more about whatever he came for than his father's life. As I struggled to my feet, gripping the stair railing for support, the reality of what had just happened settled into my bones like winter frost. My son Danny had literally stepped over me in my moment of need. The glucose tablets I kept in my shirt pocket had helped stabilize my blood sugar, but nothing could stabilize the sick feeling in my stomach. I made my way to the kitchen table, where Martha used to sit every morning with her coffee and her little expense notebook. She'd been gone 3 years now, and I'd kept that notebook in the same spot, unable to move it. Today, something compelled me to open it. Martha had always been meticulous about our finances. Every grocery trip, every utility bill, every small expense was recorded in her careful handwriting. The last entry was dated 2 days before her heart attack. Groceries, $43.62. I flipped to a fresh page and started writing. Danny had come to me the day after Martha's funeral, tears streaming down his face, asking for help with the funeral home bill. $800. Then it was his rent. $500. A week later, his car needed repairs. $750. Each time, he'd looked so lost, so broken by his mother's death, that I couldn't say no. The numbers grew as I remembered. Job interview clothes, $400. Medical bills from an emergency room visit, $900. Groceries when his food stamps ran out, $300. Car insurance, $250. Security deposits for apartments that never worked out, $1,500 total. Phone bill, internet bill, gas money for job hunting. I wrote for 2 hours, my handwriting getting shakier as the total climbed. When I finally set down the pen, I stared at the number, $47,430. $47,000 in 3 years. More than my entire annual pension from 35 years as an electrician. I'd given Danny more money since Martha died than I'd spent on myself, including my diabetes medication and doctor visits. The pattern was so clear now that I wondered how I'd missed it. Danny never called just to check on me. He never visited without needing something. Every conversation started with how he was doing, how hard things were, how he was trying so hard to get back on his feet. And I'd believed him, wanted to believe him, because Martha had always said Danny just needed to find his way. But Martha had been gone for 3 years. How long does it take a grown man to find his way? I thought about the fainting episode. My blood pressure had been climbing for months. My doctor, Patricia Williams, had asked about stress levels during my last visit. I'd told her I was managing fine, but now I realized I hadn't been managing anything. I'd been slowly killing myself trying to prop up a son who never seemed to get any closer to standing on his own. The stress of constant worry, of stretching my fixed income to cover Danny's endless emergencies, of lying awake at night wondering what crisis would come next, it was literally making me sick. I closed Martha's notebook and looked around our kitchen. Her coffee mug still sat in the cabinet where she'd left it. Her reading glasses were still on the windowsill above the sink. I'd preserved everything exactly as she'd left it, as if keeping her space unchanged would somehow keep her memory alive. But what would Martha think of what I'd become? What would she think of what Danny had become? The son she'd raised to be responsible and caring, who'd mowed lawns for spending money as a teenager and helped elderly neighbors with their groceries, had somehow turned into someone who would step over his unconscious father. That night, I called my daughter Sarah in Portland. We talked every Sunday, but this was Thursday, and she answered with concern in her voice. "Dad, is everything okay? You never call on weekdays." I almost told her about the fainting spell, about Danny's behavior, about the money, but something stopped me. Instead, I asked about my grandchildren. Listened to her talk about 8-year-old Emma's soccer games and 6-year-old Luke's fascination with dinosaurs. Normal family problems. Normal family joys. After we hung up, I sat in Martha's chair and tried to remember the last time Danny had asked about his niece and nephew. The last time he'd asked about Sarah at all. I couldn't remember. 4 days passed without a word from Danny. No phone call to check if I was okay. No text message asking about the fainting spell. Nothing. I'd started to think maybe he felt guilty about leaving me unconscious. Maybe he was too ashamed to face me. Then, Friday evening at 6:30, he showed up. I heard his car in the driveway, the same beat-up Honda Civic I'd helped him buy 8 months ago when his previous car was repossessed. The engine knocked badly. I'd offered to look at it since I knew engines from my electrical work, but Danny always said he'd get it fixed later. He knocked on the front door instead of using his key, which struck me as odd. When I opened it, Danny stood there in clothes I hadn't seen before. New jeans, expensive, looking sneakers, and a leather jacket that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something important," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. He didn't ask how I was feeling, didn't mention the other day at all. "Danny, about what happened on Monday." Yeah, I'm sorry I had to rush out," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "That job interview was really time-sensitive. But listen, I've got great news. I found a place." "A place?" "An apartment. Finally found something decent I can afford. It's in Riverside, close to the industrial district where all the good jobs are. The landlord wants first month, last month, and security deposit up front. I need $3,000. $3,000. Said like it was $3. I studied my son's face, looking for some sign of the boy who used to help me change the oil in my truck, who used to sit with Martha while she read bedtime stories about talking animals and brave knights. "Danny, when I collapsed on Monday, were you here?" His eyes shifted away from mine. "Collapsed? Dad? You just sat down hard. You were tired. I checked on you, and you said you were fine." "I was unconscious. I had a diabetic episode." "You're being dramatic. You were just resting your eyes or something. Look, can we focus on the important thing here? This apartment won't wait. The landlord has 3 other people interested." The casual dismissal of my health crisis hit me harder than the fainting spell itself. In Danny's version of events, I'd simply decided to take a nap on the hallway floor while he happened to be visiting. "Tell me about this apartment," I said carefully. "What's to tell? 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, washer and dryer hookups. Perfect for when I get settled and maybe want to have someone over." He grinned, and for a moment, I saw the charming boy who'd talked his way out of trouble throughout high school. "What's the address?" "Why do you need the address?" "I'd like to know where my son is living, Danny." "What's the landlord's name?" His face darkened. "Why are you interrogating me? Don't you trust me?" "I'm asking normal questions any parent would ask." "Fine. It's on Riverside Drive. The landlord's name is Johnson. Bob Johnson. Are you happy now?" "What's the apartment number?" "Jesus, Dad. I don't have the paperwork with me. It's apartment 2B. Look, do you want me to have a decent place to live or not?" Something in his tone reminded me of Martha during her last months, when pain medication made her irritable and defensive. But Danny wasn't sick. He was angry that I was asking questions. "Danny, in the 3 years since your mother died, how many jobs have you had?" "What does that have to do with anything?" "Just answer the question." "I've had plenty of interviews. The market's tough right now. You don't understand what it's like out there." "How many jobs, Danny?" He stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. "This isn't about jobs. This is about an opportunity. A chance for me to get stable so I can start contributing. Maybe even pay you back some of what you've loaned me." "When was your last job interview?" "Last week." 2 weeks ago. I don't keep a calendar of rejections, Dad." "What company?" "Some manufacturing place. They went with someone else." His answers were getting shorter, more evasive. "Danny, do you actually look for work?" The question hung in the air between us. He stopped pacing and turned to face me. And for the first time since Martha's funeral, I saw something real in his expression. Not grief, not determination, not hope. Anger. "You want to know the truth, Dad? Fine. I wake up every morning in that crappy studio apartment, and I think about spending the day getting rejected by people who make half what Mom used to make as a secretary. I think about putting on clothes from Goodwill and pretending to be grateful for the chance to work for minimum wage at some job that'll be automated in 5 years anyway." He sat back down, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "Mom always said I was smart. She said I had potential. Well, maybe my potential isn't stocking shelves or flipping burgers. Maybe I'm worth more than that. So what do you do all day?" "I'm figuring it out, okay? I'm planning my next move. Rome wasn't built in a day." "What time do you wake up?" "What does it matter?" "What time, Danny?" "Noon, 1 o'clock. I stay up late thinking about stuff." "Thinking about what?" "Life. Plans. You wouldn't understand." I looked at my son, really looked at him. The new clothes, the expensive shoes, the casual way he'd asked for $3,000, the complete lack of concern for my health, the defensive anger when I asked simple questions about his apartment. "Danny, your mother wouldn't have wanted this. Don't. His voice turned sharp. Don't you dare tell me what Mom would have wanted. She would have wanted me to have support from my family while I figure things out. She would have wanted me to know I had a safety net so I could take risks, pursue opportunities. She would have wanted you to be responsible. I am being responsible. I'm being responsible about my future instead of just taking any garbage job that comes along. Mom believed in me. Your mother loved you. There's a difference. He stood up again, this time moving toward the door. So that's it? You're cutting me off? 47 years old? You're 29. Whatever. You're abandoning your own son because I won't take some minimum wage job that leads nowhere? The number 47 echoed in my mind. $47,000. Had that been a slip? Or had Danny been calculating too? I didn't say I was cutting you off. I said your mother would have wanted you to be responsible. Then prove it. Help me get this apartment. $3,000, Dad. That's nothing to you. Nothing to me. $3,000 was 4 months of groceries. It was 6 months of diabetes medication. It was Martha's entire final hospital bill. But it was nothing to me. After Danny left, promising to call me when I came to my senses, I sat at Martha's kitchen table feeling like I'd been hollowed out with a spoon. The conversation kept replaying in my mind, but it was that moment, when he'd said 47 years old, instead of 29, that stuck with me. 47. Like the $47,000. Saturday morning, I called the number for Riverside Village Apartments, the only complex on Riverside Drive. A cheerful woman named Janet answered. Hi. I'm calling about a rental application from my son, Danny Richardson. 2-bedroom apartment. Unit 2B? Let me check our system. Richardson, you said? Richardson? Yes. I'm not showing any applications under that name. Are you sure he applied here? He mentioned a landlord named Bob Johnson? Janet laughed. Sir, we're a corporate-owned property. We don't have individual landlords, and I don't know anyone named Bob Johnson in our organization. I thanked her and hung up, my hands trembling slightly. Strike one. The industrial district Danny had mentioned was on the other side of town. I drove there Saturday afternoon, telling myself I was just getting out of the house. The area was mostly warehouses and small manufacturing plants, but there were no apartments. The nearest residential buildings were rundown houses at least 2 miles away. Strike two. Sunday evening, after my call with Sarah, I did something I'd never done before. I looked up Danny's social media accounts. I'd never paid attention to computers much, but Sarah had helped me set up an account to see pictures of the grandchildren. I knew Danny's last name and his email address from when I'd helped him apply for insurance, so it took some searching, but I found him. What I saw made my stomach turn. Photos from 3 weeks ago. Danny at some upscale restaurant, holding what looked like an expensive steak dinner. The caption read, "Sometimes you gotta treat yourself right." 2 weeks ago, Danny with a new gaming system, controllers spread across a coffee table. Finally upgraded my setup. Time to dominate. 10 days ago, Danny at what looked like a poker game, cards and chips visible on a green felt table. Running good tonight. Lady Luck loves me. Last week, Danny wearing the same leather jacket I'd seen on Friday, standing next to a different car. Not the beat-up Honda, but a newer sedan. Borrowed some wheels for the night. Feeling like a boss. Each post had timestamps. The poker game photo was posted at 2:30 in the morning on a Wednesday. The restaurant photo was from a Tuesday afternoon. This was what he was doing while telling me he was job hunting. I scrolled back further, looking for any mention of work, of interviews, of anything that suggested he was trying to improve his situation. Instead, I found complaints about fake people, photos of expensive purchases, and dozens of posts about being underestimated and waiting for my moment. In 3 years of posts, I found exactly 2 mentions of job searching. Both were from over a year ago. Monday morning, I walked next door to talk to Agnes Henderson. Agnes was 78, a widow like me, and she'd always been fond of Danny. He helped her carry groceries sometimes, and she often mentioned what a sweet boy he was. Agnes, I need to ask you something, and I hope you'll be honest with me. She invited me in for coffee, and we sat in her sunlit kitchen that reminded me painfully of my own. Has Danny ever asked you for money? Her face fell. Oh, Wyatt, I was hoping you'd bring this up. I didn't want to say anything because I know how much you love that boy. Tell me. He came by about 6 months ago. Said he needed help with his electric bill, that they were going to shut off his power, $50. Then it was his phone bill. Then his car insurance. Always small amounts. Always with a good reason. How much total? Maybe $300 over the past 6 months. He always promised to pay me back when he got his next job. $300 from Agnes. $47,000 from me. How many other people was Danny working? Agnes, when he helps you with groceries, does he actually help? Or does he just offer? She looked uncomfortable. Well, he offers, and he's very sweet about it. But usually, he's in a hurry to get somewhere, so I end up managing on my own. Has he ever asked you about your social security checks? When you get them, how much they are? Her eyes widened. How did you know? He asked me last month if I ever had trouble making ends meet on a fixed income. I told him sometimes it gets tight, and he said he wished he could help me the way I'd helped him. My blood ran cold. Danny was casing Agnes, figuring out if she had more money he could access. A 78-year-old woman who'd shown him nothing but kindness. Agnes, I need you to promise me something. Don't give Danny any more money. If he asks, tell him you're having your own financial troubles and can't help. Is he in some kind of trouble? Yes, but not the kind I can help him with anymore. That afternoon, I called Riverside Manufacturing, the largest employer in the industrial district. I asked to speak to someone in human resources. I'm calling about a job interview my son had with your company. Danny Richardson? It would have been last week or the week before. Let me check our interview logs. What position was he interviewing for? I'm not sure. General manufacturing, maybe? Sir, we haven't conducted any interviews in the past month. We're not hiring currently. Strike 3. I spent the rest of the week calling every business in the industrial district, every major employer in town. No one had interviewed Danny Richardson. No one had even received a resume from him. But the most damaging discovery came when I checked my own bank statements more carefully. There were ATM withdrawals I didn't remember making. Small amounts, $20 or $40, always from the machine at the grocery store where I shopped weekly. I called the bank and asked them to pull security footage from those dates. It took 3 days, but they called me back with the answer I was dreading. Danny had been using my debit card. Somehow, he'd gotten my PIN number and was making withdrawals during times when he knew I'd be at doctor appointments or running errands. The bank estimated he'd taken about $800 over 6 months. $800 in theft, $47,000 in manipulation, $300 from Agnes, unknown amounts from who knows how many other people. My son wasn't struggling to find his way. He wasn't depressed or overwhelmed by his mother's death. He was running a con game, and I was his primary mark. The boy I'd taught to throw a baseball, who'd built model airplanes with me on winter afternoons, who'd cried in my arms when his high school girlfriend broke up with him, was a thief. When I confronted Danny with what I'd discovered, he went through emotions like changing clothes. First came denial. Dad, you're confused. I never used your debit card. Maybe you forgot about those withdrawals. You're getting older. Maybe your memory isn't what it used to be. When I mentioned the bank's security footage, denial became deflection. Okay, fine. Maybe I borrowed a few bucks here and there. But you weren't using it, and I always meant to tell you. It's not like I was stealing from you. When I brought up the fake job interviews, deflection became defensiveness. So I exaggerated a little bit about the interviews. Big deal. You would have worried if you knew I wasn't getting callbacks. I was protecting your feelings. When I mentioned Agnes, defensiveness became anger. Are you seriously going to let some senile old lady turn you against your own son? She probably doesn't even remember giving me that money. But when I showed him printouts of his social media posts, the poker games, the expensive dinners, the bragging about running good, anger became something much more dangerous. Danny's entire demeanor shifted. The mask of struggling, grieving son fell away, and what replaced it was cold calculation. You want to know the truth, Dad? Fine. Here's the truth. You've been throwing money at me for 3 years because it makes you feel better about Mom dying. You couldn't save her, so you think saving me somehow makes up for it. His words hit like physical blows, but he wasn't done. And yeah, I've been letting you do it. Because guess what? You owe me. You and Mom raised me to believe I was special, that I deserved better than some ordinary life. You told me I was smart, that I had potential. Well, this is my potential. I'm smart enough to recognize opportunity when I see it. Opportunity? You're a lonely old man with more money than you need, and I'm your son. Simple economics. I stared at this stranger wearing my son's face. Danny, what happened to you? Nothing happened to me. I grew up. I realized that in this world, you either take advantage or get taken advantage of. You taught me that, actually. I never... Sure you did. Every time you complained about getting cheated by a contractor. Every time you said some customer didn't pay what they owed. Every time you talked about how hard it was to get ahead when everybody else was looking out for themselves. Well, I listened. He stood up and walked to Martha's china cabinet, picking up a small ceramic angel she'd cherished. You want me to get a job? Fine. I'll get a job. Minimum wage, 40 hours a week, no benefits. That's about $1,200 a month after taxes. You've been giving me more than that for 3 years. Which one of us is the smart businessman here? Put that down. Relax. I'm not going to break Mom's angel. Although, this thing is probably worth more than most people make in a week. The casual way he handled Martha's treasured angel, the implied threat in his words, made my chest tighten. This wasn't just theft anymore. This was intimidation. Here's what's going to happen, Danny continued, still holding the angel. You're going to give me the $3,000 for the apartment. Not because I need an apartment, but because it's cheaper than what comes next if you don't. What's that supposed to mean? I've been talking to Sarah. My blood went cold. What about Sarah? About you. About how worried I am about your health, your memory problems, your confusion about money. About how I think you might be developing dementia. You told Sarah I have dementia? I told her I was concerned. That you've been acting strange since Mom died. Forgetting things. Making poor financial decisions. Getting paranoid and suspicious of family members who are just trying to help. He set the angel down carefully, but his message was clear. Sarah's a good daughter. She loves her dad. If she thought you were becoming mentally incompetent, unable to take care of yourself, unable to manage your finances responsibly, well, she'd want to do something about that. She'd never, wouldn't she? What if I told her about you giving away $47,000 to someone you claim is manipulating you? What if I told her about you accusing your own son of theft, becoming suspicious and hostile toward family members? What if I told her you've been having health episodes, falling down, becoming confused? The room seemed to spin around me. Danny was threatening to use my own daughter against me, to paint me as incompetent and paranoid to justify putting me in a care facility. And here's the really beautiful part, Dad. If Sarah decides you need to be in a nice, safe nursing home, and if she gets power of attorney over your finances, well, who do you think she's going to trust to help her manage your care? Her beloved baby brother who's been looking out for you all these years? Or some stranger? I realized, with horrifying clarity, that Danny had been setting this up for months, maybe years. Every conversation with Sarah, where he'd mentioned my confusion, every time he'd painted himself as the devoted son, caring for his aging father, every small lie building toward this moment. You're sick. I'm practical. And I learned from the best. You think you never manipulated anyone? What about all those times you convinced customers they needed extra electrical work? What about the time you told Mom the transmission repair would cost $800, when it only cost $5, and you used the difference to buy that fishing boat? He was right about the boat. I had fudged the repair cost to justify a purchase I knew Martha would consider frivolous. But that was different. That was exactly the same thing, wasn't it? The difference, Danny said, as if reading my mind, is that I'm better at it than you ever were, and I don't feel guilty about it. What do you want? I want what I've always wanted. I want to be comfortable. I want to not have to work some garbage job just to prove I'm worthy of your support. I want you to stop pretending you're some kind of victim and accept that this arrangement works for both of us. How does this work for me? You get to feel like a good father. You get to feel like you're helping. You get to feel like you matter in someone's life. I'm doing you a favor, Dad. Without me needing your help, what are you? Just another lonely old man waiting to die. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Danny walked toward the door, then turned back. $3,000, Dad. By Friday. Or I make some phone calls that change both our lives forever. After he left, I sat in Martha's chair and cried for the first time since her funeral. The stress of Danny's threats affected me physically within days. My blood pressure spiked so high that I had another fainting episode while making breakfast Tuesday morning. This time, I came to on the kitchen floor with a goose egg on my forehead from hitting the cabinet on the way down. I drove myself to Dr. Patricia Williams' office, telling her receptionist it was an emergency. Patricia had been my doctor for 15 years, and she took one look at me and cleared her schedule. Wyatt, your blood pressure is 190 over 110. That's stroke territory. What's going on? I told her everything. The money, Danny's threats, the gambling, the manipulation with Sarah. Patricia listened without interrupting, making notes in my chart. Have you considered that this stress could kill you? I'm trying to figure out what to do. What to do? Wyatt, your son is extorting you. This isn't a family problem, it's a criminal problem. She referred me to a counselor who specialized in elder abuse, but the appointment wasn't available for 2 weeks. In the meantime, she prescribed blood pressure medication and told me to avoid stress. Avoid stress while my son was threatening to have me declared incompetent. That afternoon, I went to the bank to change my PIN number and close my debit card. While I was there, I asked to speak with a manager about the unauthorized withdrawals. Mr. Richardson, I have to ask, have you considered filing a police report? What your son did constitutes theft. He's my son. He's a thief. The relationship doesn't change the law. The bank manager, a woman named Jennifer Walsh, walked me through the documentation they had. Security footage showed Danny using my card at least 12 times over 6 months. The timestamps proved I couldn't have been present for the withdrawals. We can provide all of this to the police if you decide to press charges. But Mr. Richardson, you should know that your son asked about your account balances last month. What do you mean? He came in, said he was concerned about your mental state, asked if we'd noticed any unusual activity on your accounts. He wanted to know if you'd been making strange purchases or withdrawals. Danny had been building his case even with my bank, laying groundwork to paint me as mentally incompetent. What did you tell him? Nothing. We can't share account information with anyone but the account holder. But he was very persistent. He said he was worried you might be getting scammed by someone. The irony was suffocating. That evening, I called Sarah for our usual Sunday conversation, even though it was Tuesday. I needed to hear her voice, to know that my daughter still trusted me, still saw me as her competent father. Dad, Danny called me yesterday. He's really worried about you. My heart sank. Worried about what? He said you've been acting strange lately, paranoid. That you accused him of stealing from you, and you can't remember giving him money for emergencies. Sarah, he also said you had some kind of episode last week, that you fell down and seemed confused. Danny's version of events was already taking root in my daughter's mind. My fainting spell had become confusion. My discovery of his theft had become paranoia. Honey, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Dad, are you okay? You sound upset. How could I explain this without sounding exactly as paranoid as Danny had painted me? How could I convince her that her brother, whom she'd loved and trusted her entire life, was systematically destroying my life? I'm fine. I'm handling some difficult situations, but I'm fine. Maybe I should come visit. I could take some time off work. Bring the kids. No, don't do that. Everything's under control. But Sarah's voice carried that careful tone people use when they're humoring someone they think might be losing their grip on reality. Wednesday morning, I woke up to discover my front door was unlocked. I always locked it before bed, had done so every night for 30 years. But the deadbolt was turned. The chain was undone. Either I was losing my mind, or someone had been in my house. I searched every room, looking for signs of entry, for missing items, for anything that might explain the unlocked door. Everything seemed normal until I got to Martha's jewelry box in our bedroom. The box was still there, still closed, but the small key that Martha had always kept hidden behind a picture frame was now sitting openly on her nightstand. Someone had gone through her jewelry. I opened the box with shaking hands. Martha's wedding ring was there, her pearl necklace, her grandmother's brooch. But the envelope where she'd kept emergency cash was gone. $200 in 20s and 10s that she'd saved for a rainy day. Danny had a key to my house. Danny knew where Martha kept her emergency money. Danny had been in my house while I was sleeping, taking what he wanted, leaving the door unlocked either as a message or because he simply didn't care about my security. This wasn't just theft anymore. This was violation. This was a predator who saw my home as his personal ATM. I called a locksmith and had all the locks changed that afternoon. When he asked if I wanted to leave a spare key with any family members, I said no. Thursday evening, Danny called. Dad, I stopped by yesterday, but your door was locked, and you weren't answering. Are you okay? I changed the locks. Silence. Then, why would you change the locks? Someone was in my house. Someone took money from your mother's jewelry box. Dad, that's impossible. You probably moved that money and forgot about it. This is exactly what I was talking to Sarah about. You're getting confused, paranoid. Don't come to my house anymore, Danny. You're really going to lock out your own son? Over some imagined break-in? Dad, you need help. Professional help. Stay away from my house. I can't do that. You're my father. I have a responsibility to make sure you're safe, that you're not making decisions that could hurt yourself. The threat was clear. If I cut him off, he'd escalate his campaign to have me declared incompetent. Friday morning, I was drinking coffee at Martha's kitchen table when I heard a car in my driveway. Through the window, I saw Danny's Honda, but he wasn't alone. Sarah's rental car was parked behind him. My daughter was here. Danny had called in reinforcements for whatever confrontation he'd planned. I opened the door to find Sarah on my porch with tears in her eyes. Dad, we need to talk. Sarah hugged me at the door, but it felt different from her usual embraces. Careful. like she was handling something fragile that might break. "I'm so glad you're okay," she whispered. "Danny's been so worried about you." Behind her, Danny stood with an expression of concerned sadness that I knew was completely manufactured. He'd perfected that look over 3 years of manipulation. "Let's sit down," Sarah said, taking my arm like I needed guidance. "We need to talk about what's been happening." In my living room, Sarah and Danny positioned themselves across from me like an intervention. Sarah held a notebook, and I could see she'd been taking notes during their drive from the airport. "Dad, Danny's told me about some concerning incidents. The confusion about money, the paranoid thoughts about break-ins, the health episodes where you've fallen down. Sarah, you need to hear my side of this." "Of course. That's why I'm here. I want to understand what's really going on." But as I started to explain about the forged checks, the lies about job interviews, the systematic theft, I could see doubt creeping into Sarah's eyes. Every fact I presented sounded exactly like what Danny had primed her to expect: paranoid delusions from a confused elderly man. "Dad, do you have any proof of these things you're saying about Danny?" I realized with sinking horror that I'd been so focused on documenting Danny's behavior that I hadn't thought about how to present evidence in a way that wouldn't sound like conspiracy theories. "The bank has security footage." "Of what exactly?" Danny asked gently. "Of you using my debit card without permission." "Dad, you gave me permission. You gave me your PIN number months ago in case of emergencies. Don't you remember?" Sarah looked at me with growing concern. "Dad, you don't remember giving Danny your PIN?" I had given him my PIN number during one of his early emergencies, when his card was canceled and he needed gas money. But that was for one specific withdrawal, not blanket permission to use my account. That was for one time. "See," Danny said to Sarah, "this is what I was telling you about. He gives permission for something, then later he doesn't remember and thinks someone was stealing from him." "I remember perfectly. You used my card 12 times without asking." "Dad," Sarah said softly. "Maybe you just don't remember all the times," Danny asked. "With the stress you've been under since Mom died, and now with these health issues." I was losing her. Everything I said sounded like the confused ramblings of someone whose memory couldn't be trusted. "What about the poker games? The expensive dinners? The bragging about scamming people?" "What poker games?" Sarah asked. Danny pulled out his phone. "Dad's been misunderstanding my social media posts. I play poker online sometimes for fun. Fake money. And I posted a picture from a friend's birthday dinner that Dad thinks was me spending money I don't have." He showed Sarah his phone. The posts I'd seen had been edited or deleted, replaced with innocent explanations for everything I'd discovered. "Dad, you're scaring me," Sarah said. "These sound like delusions." "They're not delusions. Danny, show her the original posts." "Dad, these are the original posts. I think you might have misunderstood what you were seeing." I was trapped in a web of gaslighting, so sophisticated that even I was beginning to doubt my own memories. Had I misunderstood the social media posts? Had I given Danny more permissions than I remembered? "Sarah," Danny said carefully, "there's something else. Dad's been talking about giving me thousands of dollars over the past 3 years. He says it was $47,000. Sarah's eyes widened. $47,000? I think he's confused about the amounts. I mean, yes, he's helped me with some expenses since Mom died. Maybe 3 or 4,000 total. But Dad seems to think it was much more." "Show her the notebook," I said desperately. "What notebook?" "Martha's notebook, where I wrote down all the payments." Danny and Sarah exchanged a look that made my blood freeze. "Dad," Sarah said gently, "what notebook? Mom didn't keep a notebook." I stood up abruptly, stumbling slightly from dizziness, and went to the kitchen table. Martha's expense notebook was there, exactly where I'd left it, filled with my handwriting documenting every payment to Danny. But when I brought it back to the living room, Sarah and Danny were looking at me with expressions of deep concern. "Dad," Sarah said, "that's just a blank notebook." I looked down at the pages I'd filled with calculations. They were blank. I wrote everything down. The $47,000. It's all here. "Oh, Dad." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "You think you wrote things down, but the pages are empty." I flipped through the notebook frantically. Every page was blank. But I remembered writing in it. I remembered the ache in my hand from writing for 2 hours. I remembered calculating and recalculating the total. "Dad, this is why I called Sarah," Danny said gently. "You've been having these episodes where you think you've done things that you haven't actually done, like writing in notebooks that are empty, or remembering conversations that never happened." "I'm not crazy." "No one said you were crazy," Sarah said quickly. "But Dad, you might be sick. This could be early dementia, or it could be related to your diabetes. The important thing is getting you help. I stared at the blank notebook in my hands. Either I was losing my mind, or Danny had somehow switched notebooks. But how? When? Dad, I think you should come stay with me for a while, Sarah said. Just until we can get you evaluated by some doctors. Make sure you're okay. I'm not leaving my house. It's not permanent, just temporary. Danny can check on the house while you're gone. Danny would have free access to my house, my mail, my financial records. Everything would be under his control. No. Dad, you can't take care of yourself right now. Look at this notebook. You think you spent hours writing in it, but it's completely blank. You're accusing Danny of things that couldn't have happened. You're having episodes where you fall down and can't remember why. Everything Sarah said was logical. If I were in her position, listening to the evidence she'd been presented, I would probably reach the same conclusion. But I knew what I knew. I need some time to think. Of course, Danny said. This is a lot to process. But Dad, you should know that Sarah and I are worried about you living alone if you have one of these episodes and hurt yourself seriously. What are you suggesting? Maybe it's time to consider some kind of assisted living situation. Just temporarily, until you're feeling better. There it was. Danny's endgame. Get me declared incompetent. Get me placed in a facility. Gain control over my finances and property. I'm not going anywhere. Dad? Sarah started. I need you both to leave. I need time to think. We can't leave you alone right now, Danny said. Not when you're this confused. Get out of my house. Sarah was crying now. Dad, please. We're just trying to help you. Get out. They left, but I knew they'd be back. Sarah would call Adult Protective Services, or a doctor, or a lawyer. Danny had manipulated her perfectly, turning my own daughter into a weapon against me. I sat alone in my living room, holding the blank notebook, wondering if I really was losing my mind. But then I remembered something. Martha's notebook hadn't been blank when I'd started writing in it. It had contained her final entries about groceries and household expenses. If the notebook was now completely blank, either I'd hallucinated Martha's handwriting too, or someone had replaced the entire notebook. I went back to the kitchen table and examined the notebook more carefully. The pages were wrong. Martha's notebook had been a composition book with wide-ruled lines. This was a spiral notebook with college-ruled lines. Danny had switched the notebooks. Somehow, while I was out or sleeping, he'd replaced Martha's notebook with an identical blank one. I wasn't losing my mind. I was being systematically destroyed by someone who knew exactly how to make me doubt my own sanity. That night, I drove to an office supply store and bought a small digital recorder. If I couldn't trust my memory, I'd create records that couldn't be altered or replaced. And I started planning my counterattack. Danny thought he was smarter than me, that he could manipulate everyone around me into believing I was incompetent. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated his old man. I spent 3 days preparing for Danny's next visit, and I knew he'd come soon. He needed to finalize his manipulation of Sarah, needed to push me into accepting help before I had time to recover my equilibrium. First, I drove to the bank and met with Jennifer Walsh again. I asked her to print out every transaction on my account for the past 3 years, including ATM withdrawals with times and locations. I also requested copies of the security footage showing Danny using my debit card. Mr. Richardson, are you ready to file a police report? Soon. But first I need to document everything. Next, I visited my lawyer, Benjamin Curtis, whom I'd used for my will and Martha's estate. I explained the entire situation, including Danny's threats about having me declared incompetent. Wyatt, what your son is doing is called elder financial abuse. It's a felony in this state, and the threats about competency hearings constitute extortion. Ben helped me prepare several documents. A new will removing Danny as a beneficiary. A power of attorney designation, naming Sarah as my agent but requiring 2 doctors to certify any competency issues, and a formal complaint against Danny for theft and elder abuse. I also had Ben prepare a letter to Sarah explaining the evidence against Danny, with copies of bank records and security footage. The letter was detailed, calm, and factual, designed to counter Danny's narrative about my confusion and paranoia. Then, I did something that felt like betrayal, but was necessary for protection. I had a security system installed in my house, with hidden cameras in the living room, kitchen, and hallway. If Danny broke in again, I'd have video evidence. Finally, I prepared the trap. I called Danny and left a voicemail, making my voice sound tired and defeated. Danny, you win. I can't fight this anymore. The money you wanted is in the closet. Take it and leave me alone. 3 hours later, Danny called back. Dad, are you okay? You sounded really upset in your message. I'm tired, Danny. I'm old and I'm tired and I can't do this anymore. Do what? Fight with you. Fight with Sarah. Fight with everyone who thinks I'm losing my mind. Dad, no one thinks you're losing your mind. We just want to help you. The $3,000 you wanted. It's in an envelope in the hall closet, behind the coats. Take it and leave me alone. Dad, I don't want to just take money from you. We should talk about this. There's nothing to talk about. You were right. About everything. I'm just a lonely old man who doesn't understand how the world works anymore. I could hear the satisfaction in his voice, even as he tried to sound concerned. Dad, don't talk like that. You're not alone. You have family who loves you. Just take the money, Danny. Take it and go. Are you sure? I mean, if you're really okay with helping me get this apartment. I'm sure. The envelope's in the closet. Danny arrived 20 minutes later, using the key I'd forgotten he'd copied before I changed the locks. I heard him try the front door, then go around to the back. The security system recorded everything. I was sitting in Martha's chair when he came through the back door, trying to look defeated and fragile. Dad? I came as soon as I could. You sounded really bad on the phone. I'm fine. The money's where I said it was. Danny hesitated, studying my face. Are you sure about this? I don't want you to feel pressured. I said I'm sure. He walked to the hall closet, and I followed him slowly, like an old man who needed to hold onto furniture for support. Danny opened the closet door and reached behind the winter coats. Instead of an envelope of money, his hand found a manila folder. He pulled it out, confused. Dad, what is this? Open it. Danny opened the folder, and I watched his face change as he saw the contents. First confusion, then concern, then dawning horror as he realized what he was looking at. The folder contained copies of bank security photos showing him using my debit card, with timestamps proving I wasn't present. Bank statements highlighting every unauthorized withdrawal. Printouts of his original social media posts about poker games and expensive purchases, which I'd screenshotted before he could delete them. A detailed log of every lie he'd told me over 3 years. Documentation of money taken from Agnes Henderson, and probably other neighbors. But the most damaging item was a police report I'd filed that morning, formally charging Danny with elder financial abuse, theft, and extortion. Dad, what? How did you? Keep reading. There was also a letter from my lawyer explaining that I'd been evaluated by 2 independent doctors who'd certified my complete mental competency. Dr. Williams had provided detailed medical records showing that my diabetes was well controlled and had never affected my cognitive function. The letter also explained that I'd created a detailed video recording outlining Danny's crimes, which had been deposited with my attorney and would be released to authorities and family members if anything happened to me. Dad, you don't understand. I was trying to help you. Keep reading. The final document was an ultimatum. Danny had 2 choices. He could accept enrollment in a residential rehabilitation program for gambling addiction and financial crimes, with mandatory counseling and supervised probation for 2 years, or he could be arrested and prosecuted for felony elder abuse, which carried a sentence of up to 7 years in prison. If he chose rehabilitation, the criminal charges would be suspended but not dismissed. Any contact with me during the treatment period, any attempt to manipulate other family members, any new crimes, would result in immediate prosecution. If he chose rehabilitation and successfully completed the program, I would consider allowing supervised contact to rebuild our relationship. But the days of unconditional support were over forever. Danny's face had lost all color. His hands shook as he read through the documents. You can't do this to me. I'm your son. You stopped being my son the day you stepped over my unconscious body to steal from my kitchen. I wasn't stealing. I was just... Danny, stop. It's over. The lies, the manipulation, the threats, all of it. He tried anger. You're ruining my life over money? Over some stupid misunderstanding? This isn't about money. This is about you becoming someone who would threaten to have his own father committed to steal his inheritance. He tried bargaining. Dad, I'll pay you back. Every penny. I'll get a job. I'll make things right. With what money, Danny? You've been unemployed for 3 years. You have a gambling addiction. You've been stealing from elderly neighbors. He tried manipulation. What would Mom think of you doing this to me? Sending your own son to prison? Your mother would be ashamed of what you've become. But she'd be proud that I finally stopped enabling you. Finally, he tried desperation. Sarah's going to hate you for this. She'll never forgive you for destroying her brother's life. Sarah's already read copies of everything in that folder. She drove back to Portland this morning, after apologizing for not believing me sooner. That was a lie. but a necessary one. Sarah was still processing the evidence I'd shown her, still struggling to reconcile the brother she'd loved with the criminal I'd documented. But she was no longer Danny's ally. Danny sank into a chair, still holding the folder. How long have you known? I suspected for months. I've known for certain for a week. Why didn't you just cut me off? Why all this elaborate setup? Because cutting you off wouldn't have stopped you. You would have found other victims, other ways to con people. This way, you get help instead of just getting cut loose. And if I refuse the rehabilitation, then you go to prison. And I testify at your trial about every lie you've told, every dollar you've stolen, every threat you've made. Danny was quiet for a long time, staring at the police report with his name on it. The rehab program. How long? 18 months minimum, residential for the first 6 months, then supervised outpatient with mandatory employment and financial counseling. And after that? After that, we'll see. If you complete the program, if you stay clean, if you build an honest life, maybe we can try to rebuild our relationship. But it will be on my terms, with boundaries, and with the understanding that I'll never trust you with money again. Danny nodded slowly. What about Sarah? What about my reputation? Your reputation is your problem. Sarah will decide for herself whether she wants a relationship with you after you complete the program. And the neighbors? Agnes? You'll make financial restitution to everyone you've stolen from. That's part of the program. Danny closed the folder and looked at me directly for the first time in years. Not the calculated look of someone assessing a mark, but actual eye contact. I really messed up, didn't I? Yes, you did. Did you ever love me? Or was I always just some burden you were stuck with? The question broke my heart, because I could hear the lost little boy underneath the manipulative adult. Danny, I loved you so much that I let you destroy both our lives rather than face the truth about what you'd become. I loved you so much that I enabled you until it almost killed me. But love isn't enough anymore. You need help that I can't give you. He was quiet for another long moment. The rehabilitation place. Is it like prison? It's like a chance to become the man your mother raised you to be. Will you visit? After 6 months, if your counselors think it's appropriate, I'll consider it. Danny stood up, still holding the folder. I need to think about this. You have until tomorrow morning. If you don't check into the program by noon, I'll have you arrested. After Danny left, I sat in my house for the first time in 3 years without fear. No fear that he'd show up demanding money. No fear that he'd manipulate someone else into thinking I was incompetent. No fear that I'd wake up to find him going through Martha's things. 6 months later, I received a letter from Danny at the rehabilitation facility. It was the first honest communication I'd gotten from him since Martha's funeral. Dad, I'm writing this letter as part of my therapy. My counselor says I need to acknowledge the harm I've done and express genuine remorse, not because it might get me something, but because it's true. I stole from you. Not just money, but peace of mind, trust, and the memory of Mom that you should have been able to cherish. I turned your grief into a weapon against you. I threatened to destroy your relationship with Sarah to protect my own selfishness. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect a relationship. But I want you to know that I understand now what I did to you. And I'm working every day to become someone who could never do those things again. I have a job here at the facility, working in the kitchen. I wake up at 6 every morning, and I earn my keep honestly. It feels different from anything I've done in years. I think about Mom sometimes, and I know she would be ashamed of who I became. But I think she'd be proud that you finally stopped letting me hurt you. I'm not asking for anything. Just wanted you to know that I'm trying to get better. Danny. I kept the letter, the first thing Danny had given me in years that didn't come with a price tag. A year and a half later, Danny completed the program. He'd found steady work as a kitchen manager at a restaurant, was attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings, and had paid back every penny he'd stolen from Agnes and the other neighbors. He called and asked if we could meet for coffee. Not at my house, not somewhere private where he might feel he could manipulate me, but at a public restaurant where we'd have to behave like civilized people. We met on a Tuesday afternoon. Danny looked different. Thinner, older, with lines around his eyes that spoke of genuine worry instead of calculating angles. He'd learned to meet people's eyes directly, instead of looking past them for opportunities. I brought something for you, he said, pulling out an envelope. Inside was a check for $47,430. How? I asked. I sold everything I bought with your money, the gaming system, the expensive clothes, some jewelry I'd bought. I took out a loan for the rest, which I'll be paying off for the next 5 years. But it's your money, and you should have it back. Danny, I don't need... Yes, you do. Not because you need the money, but because I need to give it back. I need to prove to myself that I can earn something honestly and give it to someone without expecting anything in return. I took the check, but I didn't cash it right away. I wanted to see if this was another angle, another manipulation. But weeks passed, and Danny didn't call asking for favors or reminding me about his gesture. The check was simply a check. We started meeting for coffee once a month. Always in public, always brief, always with clear boundaries. Danny would tell me about his job, his therapy, his small apartment that he paid for with his own earned money. I would tell him about my health, my hobbies, my quiet life. We didn't talk about Martha much at first. That wound was too deep, too connected to his worst behavior. But eventually, carefully, we began sharing memories of her that weren't tainted by his manipulation. I dream about her sometimes, Danny told me one afternoon. She's always disappointed in me in the dreams. Not angry, just sad. She loved you, Danny. She was never disappointed in you as a person, only in some of your choices. Do you think she'd forgive me? I think she'd be proud that you're trying to make amends. What about you? Do you forgive me? I considered the question carefully. I forgive the addiction, Danny. I forgive the desperation and the poor choices. But I'll never forget the cruelty. The way you threatened to have me committed, the way you used my love for you as a weapon. That changed something between us permanently. I understand. But I'm proud of the work you're doing now. I'm proud that you chose the hard path instead of the easy one. Sarah visited for Christmas that year, bringing Emma and Luke. It was the first time in 2 years that she'd been comfortable leaving her children alone with me. The first time she'd been certain that my house was safe. Danny asked if he could stop by while they were there, just to say hello to his niece and nephew. Sarah was hesitant, but she agreed to a brief visit. Watching Danny with Emma and Luke, I saw glimpses of the boy he'd been before addiction and entitlement corrupted him. He brought them small gifts he'd bought with money he'd earned. A book about dinosaurs for Luke, a soccer ball for Emma. Nothing expensive, nothing designed to impress adults. Just thoughtful presents from an uncle who was trying to be worthy of their affection. When he left that evening, Sarah hugged him goodbye. Not the careful, worried embrace she'd given me during his manipulation campaign, but a real hug. I'm proud of you, she told him. It took courage to get help. After they left, I sat in Martha's chair and thought about the journey we'd all taken. Danny from addiction to recovery, Sarah from manipulation to clarity, me from enabling to enforcing boundaries. The house felt peaceful in a way it hadn't since Martha died. Not because my son was absent from my life, but because the person now in my life was actually my son, not the predator who'd replaced him. I learned something important during those dark years. Loving someone doesn't mean accepting abuse from them. Helping someone doesn't mean enabling their worst behavior. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop rescuing them from the consequences of their actions. Danny still calls me every Sunday. He still struggles sometimes with the urge to take shortcuts, to find angles, to avoid the honest work of building a life. But he's learned to recognize those urges and call his sponsor instead of acting on them. He's been dating a woman he met in group therapy, someone who understands addiction and recovery. He's thinking about going back to school, maybe studying counseling so he can help other people who've lost their way. Most importantly, he's learned that his value as a person isn't measured by what he can get from others, but by what he can contribute to the world through honest work and genuine relationships. I'm 70 now, and my health is good. My blood pressure is controlled, my diabetes is managed, and I sleep well at night because I'm not waiting for the next crisis, the next demand, the next manipulation. I volunteer at a community center now, helping other seniors recognize and protect themselves from financial abuse. Elder abuse is more common than most people realize, and it often comes from the people victims trust most, their own family members. The work gives me purpose and helps me process what happened with Danny. Every person I help protect is a small victory against the predators who see elderly people as easy targets. Martha's china cabinet still holds her ceramic angel, the one Danny had threatened that day when he revealed his true nature. Sometimes I hold it and tell her about Danny's progress, about Sarah's children, about the quiet contentment of a life lived with clear boundaries and honest relationships. I believe Martha would be proud of all of us. Danny for fighting his way back to decency, Sarah for learning to trust her own judgment, and me for finally learning the difference between love and enabling. The most important lesson I can share with anyone facing a similar situation is this: you can't help someone by allowing them to hurt you. You can't save someone who's determined to destroy themselves. But you can set boundaries, enforce consequences, and refuse to be a victim of someone else's poor choices, even if that someone is your own child. Sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes helping means stepping back. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to stop being afraid of disappointing someone who has repeatedly disappointed you. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where someone you loved was taking advantage of your kindness? How did you find the strength to set boundaries while still caring about that person? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps someone else find the courage to choose their own well-being over someone else's manipulation. Remember, you deserve to be treated with respect, even by the people you love most. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.